Kyle Leblanc, an American foreign worker, works at a steel plant in Magnitogorsk, Russia. After his wife complains that he does not give her enough time, he intends to visit her during his vacation. While driving home, he calls her to notify her of his visit, but he hears her screams as a man named Sergio Kovic assaults her and stabs her when she fights. Kyle goes home to aid her but discovers her lifeless body, while Kovic flees the house. After chasing him down, both are taken to the police station, but Kovic uses his influence to persuade the court to proclaim him innocent owing to a lack of evidence. Kyle is enraged by this unjust ruling and steals a revolver from one of the guards, shooting Kovic many times in the middle of the courthouse. As a result of this crime, he is condemned to life in jail and refused parole. He is transferred to Kravy prison, where the warden General Riskov punishes an inmate in front of the newcomers to give a warning that they may face similar punishment if they attempt to flee. Kyle is beaten up by an officer, Lieutenant Tolik, when relinquishing his possessions after refusing to hand over his wedding band, which Tolik violently removes. At night, some officers take another American convict, Billy Cooper, to a cell where he is beaten and raped by Ander, a gangster who has bribed the officers to comply with his demands. The next morning, Billy is brought to the hospital, severely injured and frightened, while Ander walks quietly out of the jail. Ander begins a battle with Kyle as he teases him in the same way as his wife's killer did before being interrupted by officers who lock him away in solitary prison. After becoming dissatisfied with spending time in the filthy confinement cell, he goes on a hunger strike and attempts suicide but fails. He gets frequent flashbacks of his deceased wife, which motivates him to survive, and he gradually starts eating the food offered to him. He is soon pulled out and assigned to a cell with an inmate, number 451, who is known to have murdered his prior cellmates. When Kyle arrives, Officer Tillich warns him to be careful and offers to change his cell in return for money, but he declines. Kyle is terrified of his cellmate because of his horrible reputation, but he doesn't say anything to him. After a few days, his brother-in-law pays him a visit and assures him that he is working to get him out, but asks him to pay the guards to make his life easier. Meanwhile, Kyle sees Billy in the jail yard, who informs him that he has been sentenced to a year and a half in prison for driving under the influence of drugs and colliding with a restaurant. As they converse, another wheelchair-bound convict, Malachi, walks in and explains how things work at Kravy. He explains that Ander is a member of the Russian mafia, paying the guards enough money to get things done his way and leading a gang inside the prison. During the conversation, Malachi tells them about his influence and invites them to contact him if they have any questions. Kyle begins to settle down, but Ander teases him frequently, driving him to fight. After his cellmate, 451, terrifies him by attempting to choke him, he pays a guard and demands that they change his cell, but he tells him to wait or up the fee. After a few days, a large conflict is arranged inside the prison. Malachi informs them that General Ruskov arranges these battles and gambles by betting his money on the fighters. Ander is regarded as Kravy's best fighter, because he has never lost a battle and consistently brutalizes his opponents. While watching the fight, Kyle asks Malachi if his cellmate ever engages in these bouts, but is told that he declined years ago. Although the police dislike his decision, they are unable to punish him because they earn a lot of money by putting other inmates in his cell and then accommodating their desire to shift. After a few days, Billy is escorted back to Ander's cell, where he attempts to harm him, but is instead attacked and rushed to the infirmary. Kyle is beaten up by gang members while working with other prisoners after accidentally offending them. They tell the officer that Kyle tried to disrespect them, and he permits them to exact their retribution, resulting in his being severely beaten by them. Kyle is moved back to the solitary cell, where he hears another inmate in the next room and attempts to converse with him through the wall. Time passes, and he becomes influenced by observing the savagery in the prison, where gangs pick battles with one another and kill other inmates over petty differences. While at labor, as the guards are injured by a mine, Billy decides to take advantage of the situation and makes an unsuccessful escape with another convict, who is shot while Billy is returned to the prison. Meanwhile, Kyle is taken back to solitary confinement, where he begins to work on himself and build his strength to survive. But his cellmate becomes afraid that Kyle is losing his genuine nature. As another bout is scheduled, Kyle faces off against Ander, who swiftly begins beating him up. Kyle soon surprises everyone by returning and savagely biting Ander in the neck, killing him while suffering a mental breakdown as his cellmate watches in shock. This first fight proves to be a watershed moment for him, and he continues to win, earning him a lot of respect from the other convicts, as he becomes more aggressive in his fights and frequently kills his opponents. Malachi and Billy are concerned by his new conduct as he returns to his cell. Inmate 451, who is concerned about him, says, "Do you even know who you are?" but thinks he has likely gone too far to return. Kyle prevents his brother-in-law from attempting to get him out the next time he visits, believing that nothing will change and does not want to give false optimism. During the Russian Independence Day celebrations, Malachi encourages Billy to flee, but confesses his plan to the guards in exchange for medication. When being tormented by officers, Billy is sent to another cell with a new convict, Valia, who rapes and tortures him to death when Billy spits in his face. Kyle sees Billy badly injured in the jail and goes to save him, but he dies from his injuries after telling him, "Don't let them turn you into something you are not." Billy's body is quietly buried in the earth without anyone knowing. Kyle, moved by his advice, stands up for himself and refuses to struggle any longer, and is hanged outside as a punishment for all to witness. Despite the terrible weather circumstances, he refuses to participate in their unscrupulous games. Meanwhile, 451, who has discovered Malachi's betrayal of Billy, decides to punish him by pouring flammable liquid all over his body and setting him on fire. This fire reminds him of when he was tormented by his teacher, but he exacted his revenge in the same way he did with Malachi. Other detainees are inspired by Kyle's persistence and determination to fight for their rights. The competing gangs reconcile their differences and join, refusing to fight each other. As each of them refuses to participate in the game, the cops are helpless to penalize them all. The scenario irritates General Ruskov and his other officers because they used to make a lot of money betting on battles. After holding Kyle accountable for their rebellion, they intend to get rid of him to calm things down. Kyle is released from imprisonment and transferred to the infirmary, where he remembers his wife, Grace, who expresses her joy at his return. As he complains about missing her, she reminds him that nobody is truly gone as long as someone remembers them. Enraged by his actions, Lieutenant Tillich brings in Milik, the most dangerous prisoner, and orders him to fight Kyle. During the struggle, Kyle beats on the wall in the same way he did in prison, causing Milik to recognize him as the only person who has ever attempted to connect with him. He instantly ends the fight and befriends Kyle. The lieutenant is frustrated by the situation and puts a gun at them, demanding them to fight, but Kyle and Milik assault him instead. This sparks a riot as the convicts begin rebelling against the guards and breaking out of their cells. The cop shoots Milik several times, but he manages to take him down. As the inmates begin to damage the premises, Kyle turns to Milik and comforts him, but he dies as a result of his injuries. Soon the guards seize control of the situation by summoning additional forces, forcing the convicts to retire to their cells. Kyle reveals his cellmate about his wife's murder and explains that when he lost himself, he also lost her, but he does not want to make the same mistake again. When 451 notices his frustration, he offers to help him leave. When he returns to their cell, he hands him some paperwork containing evidence of all the killings and corruption that occurred there over the last 20 years, and he says that his plan includes one final struggle. Kyle doesn't want to do it again, but it's his only way out. Kyle decides to partake in another fight, which General Ruskov considers a victory because it allows him to kill Kyle and get rid of him for good. Kyle fights Valia again the next day, this time dislocating his shoulder. As a response, Valia attempts to attack him with a pocket knife, but it unintentionally strikes another gang boss, as Kyle beats Valia against a pole, shouting, "It's for Billy." As 451 informed him, the cops intend to take him out of prison and shoot him. Meanwhile, he slips into the garage via a secret tunnel and attacks the guards to save Kyle. Kyle retrieves the keys from a guard and unlocks his restraints before reclaiming his ring and crushing him with a car. On 451's advice, he changes into the guard's uniform and invites him to accompany him, but he refuses to leave and passes him the paperwork, begging him to spread the word about this place. As Kyle takes the guard's car and prepares to depart, 451 returns to the general's office and kills him in retaliation for his actions. The guards quickly apprehend him and return him to his cell, but Kyle escapes successfully. When he returns to the United States, he releases the records, prompting the closure of Krabe prison after 3 months.